What I'm going to talk about this morning is really the overall context of your life and how you can retain a faith in your life when your life breaks your heart, because it is guaranteed to break your heart. There is no way that you can travel through life, and especially through love, which we all want, without having your heart deeply broken. And it's at that point that many people lose their faith. You must have noticed this. And many people especially who have a sense that there is a God who watches over things and might know exactly what's going on, a kind of superintendent of the universe, they feel very betrayed by this God when their hearts are broken. And I can guarantee you that your heart will be broken in some way that surprises you. It won't be something that you anticipated. There's one poem by Derek Walcott called Odd Job, a Bull Terrier, which is about love and loss. I highly recommend it. And it ends by saying that all love, whether it's for your pet, your partner, your children, is one love, and it is all blessed by loss, which seems paradoxical. But I'm going to try to convey to you in this short time a bit about why it's not entirely paradoxical that love is blessed by loss. So first of all, let me just say a word about faith, because I know that's the theme here at your community for this month of May. And you probably know from your own experience that faith really is based on this sense of trust, that you can trust what's going on, and that at times of difficulty in your life, especially surprising and traumatic difficulty, you lose your trust. And many people then at that point contract very much in their experience. They may back away from their communities, they may back away from their spiritual practice, and they may back away from engaging in life. And in that backing away, sometimes there's a period of time when you need to back away and restore yourself, but there's also a temptation to stay backed away once you've had a very difficult or traumatic experience. You all recognize that, I think. You know that that's the case. And what we find, I'm a psychotherapist, a psychologist, a psychoanalyst, a lot of psycho in there. What we find, those of us who practice in this field, that after a person has suffered a great loss, there can develop a sense of alienation. And then that can be called grief. And that really is not what grief is. Grief is not alienation. So if you have friends or family, or you yourself have pulled back out of your life because you have that sense that life has betrayed you, then you need to check into your actual experiences. It's very likely that you're experiencing anger, shame, and envy instead of grief. Grief should be healing. It should allow you to return back into your life. So this faith in life, this is what I'm talking about today, that you have faith in your life no matter what. From a Buddhist point of view, and I've been a practicing Buddhist since 1970, so I know a lot about the Buddhist frame of reference. I also teach Buddhism, and I teach mindfulness, and I practice, and I go out and practice with different communities. From a Buddhist point of view, we have really a kind of cycle of life and death. And so death and loss is a door that's opening into spring and life again. So it goes around between birth, life, death, the transition between death and birth, and then back to birth again. My first Buddhist teacher, Philip Kapleau, who founded the Rochester Zen Center over in Rochester, New York, when he was in his middle 70s, he would say that he was older than Methuselah and younger than a newborn babe. So he saw himself in this cycle of life and death. He was both old and he was very young. He hadn't yet actually been born. So when you take that perspective, and you don't have to take it literally from the point of view of individual life and death, you can take it also from the point of view of moment to moment to moment, that the death of one moment is the birth of the next moment. So this way of seeing things, this cyclical way of seeing the connection between death and life, between winter and spring, is what I'm going to try to convey in teaching you a little bit about the so-called marks of existence from a Buddhist perspective. And you have a handout. You don't need to look at it right now, but you have it to take home with you. I'm going to talk about these three aspects of our existence here. And I'm going to talk about them both from a Buddhist perspective and also from a pragmatic perspective. If you're familiar with Buddhist teachings, you know that primarily Buddhism is about this life. It is not primarily about what happens after this life. It has, built into it teachings about that, but mostly it's about living here and now and what works to keep you engaged. Because life is actually an engagement. It's never a disengagement. So once you start to disengage, you're outside of life. So let me talk about these three marks of existence. The framework that is trying to be conveyed by this teaching is that this is a contract that you have already signed by coming into existence. When you were born, here was the contract, and it includes in it that you will die and that everything around you will die. That was part of the deal. Many of us don't like to look deeply at that. So the first aspect of our existence, from a Buddhist perspective, the outstanding sort of piece of wisdom, is that this life that we're in is what's called dukkha in Sanskrit or Pali. That's P-A-L-I, not P-O-L-L-Y, Pali. Dukkha is a quality of experience. It's often translated into English as suffering, but that is not what dukkha means. That's a bad translation. It refers to a quality that doesn't have a good English term. That's the quality of being off-center. It's the quality of a bone that is riding out of its socket, so it's always off balance and it's hurting, causing stress. It's the quality of a wheel riding off the axle, so it can't carry you in a steady way. So this quality of dukkha is inherently a part of this world that you are in. You did not create it. Your parents are not at fault for it. And it isn't simply because Donald Trump might be elected president. We are in a condition here that is highly imperfect, limited, and unsatisfactory. There is no way we can make perfection out of it because it is always off, somehow off-center. So that if we eliminate, as we did, DDT, because we didn't want to use it as an insecticide, we have also brought about many, many more cases of malaria in Africa because we got rid of all the stockpiling of the DDT. So on one hand, we seem to solve a problem. On the other hand, we seem to create eventually a problem from that solution. You might have, again, noticed this in life. You feel you solve something, and then suddenly that solution turns into a problem. Similarly, when you look at your life, whether you look at yourself or you look at the family you're in, your friends, Your politicians, right now politicians are really in the focus. You see things that are very highly imperfect, things you would feel you need to change or control. And this control aspect that we respond to our experience with causes a great deal of difficulty for us. We are the sort of animal that wants to predict and control. And then we look at these imperfect conditions and we want to change something to fix them. But that cannot possibly work. From the Buddhist point of view, the first noble truth is to look at our situation and say, this is highly unsatisfactory. And also not to cling to some way of fixing it. So recognizing the unsatisfactoriness is the first step of liberation. And you then say, okay, here, I have found myself in this highly unsatisfactory situation here. What can I do about that if I'm looking for happiness or faith and so on? Well, the very first thing is not to blame yourself and not to blame your parents or your politicians or whatever. Recognize that this is in the nature of the world. It is in the nature of the world to be broken. As Leonard Cohen says, that's how the light gets in. We're going to listen to Leonard for a moment at the end of this. So this unsatisfactoriness is in the world. It's in, as Leonard says, arbitrary space. It's cruelty, but it brings grace. So what he talks about as healing occurs in the arbitrary space of cruelty and grace, where we see something, we recognize it as being highly unsatisfactory, and then we find a way to be loving, to be kind, to be full of faith in the midst of it. So we'll come back to that in a moment. Often that comes through our connection, a deep connection. The second quality of our experience is easier to understand. It's called anicca in Pali, and actually I think these are the Sanskrit terms rather than the Pali terms. Anicca can be easily translated into English as impermanence. So what we were talking about in the poem, what we were talking about just a little while ago, that everything comes to an end, that we are all aging, every moment everything is changing. People often notice it more in young children. I don't know how many times people say to me, I want to be around when my children are growing up because they change so fast. Well, hello, it's happening to you all the time, the exact same kind of changing. But you just notice it in the young children because, like the flowers, they're coming up in the spring, but it's going on all the time. So this impermanence is actually the condition of constant change. Now, in early Buddhism, that was what the Buddha saw as the root of dukkha, the constant change, because it guarantees illness, old age, and death. Sometimes people think, well, we're going to get rid of illness. We're going to find a cure for all these illnesses. Impossible. Illness is built into this situation. It's part of dukkha. There will never be a cure for illness as long as life is so interdependent here as it is. So, because we couldn't have one organism that lived forever without the whole environment being thrown off. I mean, human beings, again, we can't seem to get this. We think we should be on top of things. We should live forever. And what would happen to everything else here? Oh, really? We don't know. So the impermanence is built in, part of the birth and death. So if you look at it from one side, there's a tremendous sadness, there's a tremendous loss. If you look at impermanence from another side, there's liberation, there's change. You know that if you are at this moment having a moment of contraction, of loss, of suffering, soon that will change. If you connect to life itself, it has to change. Life is change. So you cannot possibly hang on to that sad feeling. Actually, all feelings last about 30 seconds. That's how long they last. If you're walking around with some feeling that you say, oh, I'm troubled by it night and day, it's because you're generating a story that keeps you connected to that feeling. It's the narrative that keeps us connected to the feelings. So the dog doesn't have a narrative. You've noticed that the dog walks around without a whole lot of burden of feeling. The dogs have the same basic emotions that we have. The only thing that they don't have are the self-conscious emotions, the emotions that come to human beings starting at the age of 2, where we start identifying with I, me, mine, and separating ourselves out from everything else. So feelings, emotions are not the problem. They're not the reason why we suffer from loss. It is the narrative that we tell ourselves about what our situation is. So the third quality that is one of the marks of existence, reason for being here, we might say, because it's part of the contract. It's harder to explain, and I'm going to try to do it briefly. It is what's called anatta, or an-atman, in I believe that the an-atman is the Sanskrit. I kind of go back and forth in my mind because I don't know either Pali or Sanskrit. I know some words in them. But an-atman means essentially self with an X through it, no self. And to try to convey this idea quickly, it is not the void. It is not nothingness. It is not no self, all of which it has been translated as being. What it is trying to get you to see is that the deep context of life does not have things in it. There is no thingness in this life. So here in this room, we are here all together and all at once. It's not like I'm just up here and you're over there and we're all these little boundaried little ships sailing at night. That is not the case here. We are in this very embedded situation so that if one tiny thing in your life were different, the entire universe would have to be different. So once something has happened, people go back and say, well, if I hadn't married him, my life would have been different. Well, if you hadn't married him, everything would have been different. It would have been a different universe because everything is radically dependent on everything else in time and space and in every possible way. That's why even the interdependence idea is too mild. That's too mild. So here we are all together. If I put a pink drop into this room, it's like putting a pink drop into a glass of water. It goes all over. It affects all of us, including me. I'm in this too. If I put a black drop in the room, same thing. It affects all of us. So this radical embeddedness of anatta means that we are really not separated out. All of our actions, our attitudes, our feelings, they're in this mix in a subtle way that we often cannot see and know. And the consequences of kindness, goodness, compassion are beyond our knowledge. Once we've become kind and good and compassionate in our context, the influence goes out into the universe, and we can't see how far it goes. Similarly, if we go the other direction, it also goes out. So we are very much affected collectively and individually by the level of our trust and faith, compassion in the deep context of our lives. And so let me say that when there is a loss that upsets your life fundamentally, we have a tendency in our culture to protect ourselves then, to say, now this is the time I need to protect myself. And yes, to some extent, you need to be able to tell your story about what happened. You do need to be able to share it with your friends until you can integrate it. But then you need to be able to open to life again with the absolute faith that your life will bring you something new. I myself went through a major loss. My husband, my very dear, wonderful husband of 25 years, we were together for 30 years, got early onset Alzheimer's. He started in his mid-50s. We lost everything financially. We lost everything, because everyone does with it. He then reversed his emotional maturity, went from being a 54-year-old back to really being an infant by the time he died, which was in 2014. And I went through that whole experience with him, and somewhere near the beginning, at the point that I knew that he was losing his mind and that we were losing everything financially, I sat down and said, everything is changing now. It is changing in a way that I do not understand and I cannot predict. So let me see if I can be open to that change and see what it teaches me. Because look, I've been practicing this Buddhism thing for lots of years by this time, and I was practicing so that at the moment this was going to happen to me, I was going to be open. That was what I was practicing for. And so let me be open. And actually being open during that time found many wonderful things, and not the least of which was that my husband, whose name is Ed Epstein, actually deepened his spiritual practice. After he couldn't speak, after he couldn't walk, after he couldn't talk, he was smiling still, he was engaged, and he knew that this was teaching him more than any other spiritual practice had taught him, because he was losing his ego. He was losing everything, really, that kept him separate from others. He was joining into the context in a deep way. So this embeddedness that we have, when you can engage back into it again, you will find that your life teaches you in a new way. And I'm going to end with Leonard Cohen, who is going to sing about this in a song called Come Healing, and it's from his CD called Old Ideas. And I'm happy to talk with you when we go to the tea break later, where we could talk a little bit more depth about these ideas. And I hope that you have some sort of sense of how these marks of existence and the way you're embedded in a life that sometimes looks like it is going in a very negative way by your own feelings can be opening to something that is quite mysterious and quite wonderful. And I hope you can also hear the words of the song that I'm about to play. I will tell you the first verse, just so you can get the flavor. Gather up your brokenness and bring it to me now. The fragrance of those promises you never dared to vow. The splinters that you carry, the cross you left behind. Come healing of the spirit, come healing of the mind. So this teaching is very much on the nature of reality, and it's about the actual faith that comes from our brokenness and our recognition that it is the nature of this life to be broken. We're all in it, broken, and compassion grows from that, and love exists in the midst of that.